Evergreen Heart. By Oprian. Chapter 29. Wrath and Ruin. The city of Kipajikito was the largest city in all of Zebra Qey. Built around a large central lake that provided it with all the water it ever needed. The waters of the lake sparkled in the sunlight. The city itself was built from a combination of wood and stone, in an elegant mix of spiral patterns. Many buildings were decorated with crushed gemstone common to the area. It gave the buildings a luster that earned the city its nickname of the Shining Jewel. The sky streak was currently gliding through the sky above the lake, towards a large white building with spiral towers on the far side. This was the Equestrian Embassy. As the ship moored at one of the towers, Bonbon leapt off the deck and ran down the stairwell. She was late. The trip across the sea should have been smooth, but foul weather drifting in from the far north had delayed the sky streak by several days. Her weather Pegasi unable to clear the foul clouds and strong wind. As she arrived in the main foyer she found herself completely alone. "You are Agent Sweetie Drops," a soft-spoken male voice whispered in her ear. "Wa-ark!" Bonbon yelped, nearly jumping out of her skin. A cloaked being she had never seen before stood beside her. This creature looked equine-ish, but not quite. Giraffe-ish, but again, not quite. For one thing its neck, while strangely elongated, wasn't quite long enough to be one. And its coat was brown for the most part, but its legs were striped like a zebra. A creation of discord or the result of a wild night, a few pints, and some questionable choices between friends? "I am an okapi, not a hybrid." "I wasn't." Bonbon started while composing herself. "Yes, you were," he said with a knowing grin. "It's not the first time some pony thinks such, and won't be the last." Bonbon rolled her eyes, then gave him an appraising look. "I trust you were briefed." "Only with the basics. I am Agent Kivuli, I was told to be your guide in the field and to assist you." "You are hunting some kind of fugitive? Potentially dangerous?" "Yes. Something like that. I will tell you what I know, but this must stay strictly between us for the time being. So long as doing so does not go against my standing orders I shall be most discreet. The being we're after has powerful wild magic. He and his associate jumped on a trade ship that's heading here. I was supposed to head them off, but my arrival was delayed. We need to go to the nearest port town and find out where they went. Then we have a problem," said Kivuli. "No ships from Equestria have docked in our ports in over a month." "But, that's impossible, they should be here by now." "There, may be an explanation," he said hesitantly. "What explanation?" "They may have been waylaid by pirates, if they have not made it here by now. It shames me to say there has been some growing trouble with them lately." "If that is so, then where could they be?" "There is a port town in the north of Zebra Qey, past the drylands. It gets frequented by the less desirable. It would be as good a place as any to start the search." "All right, how fast can we get there?" "How fast can you run, Agent Drops?" "I suggest we stock up on water before heading out. They are called the drylands for a reason." It took Bonbon and Kivuli a good 4 days to reach the northern parts of Zebra Qey. 4 days of running across the arid landscape with only as much water as they could carry. Not since her survival training in the Badlands had Bonbon run that much on so little water. How any being could live out there was a mystery to her. Vegetation was sparse. Twice they came across a dried-up pond. Kivuli explained that during the rainy season the ponds would fill to the point of overflowing, and the nearby land would turn lush and green with young plants. Bonbon found that hard to believe as she stared at the cracked dry earth all around them, with only the occasional dry twig or decrepit-looking bush sticking out of the ground. She could have brought additional water in her dimensional bag, but the last time she'd done that she'd left a bottle in there for months by mistake and the water had gone bad. Besides, even the bag had limited space, and right now it was full of gadgets and equipment. Some called her overprepared, maybe even a little crazy. But they had never fought monsters and other dangerous life forms. It was the morning of the 5th day when they spotted wisps of smoke on the horizon. "Is that a fire?" Bon Bon asked. "That might very well be. The flames have gone out though." "How can you tell?" "The color of the smoke. It is grey. If the fire were still burning it would be black." "Isn't the town in that direction?" "Yes, I suggest we make haste." The terrain this close to the coast was more rocky and hilled. It took another hour, weaving between rocks and climbing across hills, but eventually they reached the port of Pearl Cove. What they found was not what they expected. As they crossed the last hill they got their first look at the town. Or rather, what was left of it. The beating of a large, rusted tin bell began Trixie Lulamon's day. As it had for the last 3 weeks in Ivory Oasis. Ivory Oasis, a rather innocent name for a place such as this, a misfitting one if ever there was. 3 weeks, and yet it seemed so much longer. While time here was interminably slow, falling into a routine wasn't as she removed the meager blanket and rose from her bed. Maji was already up, as always, and sat in her morning meditation, uncaring of the world around her. It was almost like she was above it all when Trixie saw her like that. Taking a small cloth rag she pulled out her water skin. It was made from the many shed hides of the large sand snakes that lived in the area. There was a time Trixie would have found this nauseating, but for nearly a month now, this was her most precious possession. Slaves were never given anything. If they wanted something they had to make it themselves in their spare time. Anything they managed to craft or build was theirs to keep. This was the rule the master had established. If you wanted something you worked for it. It was all part of his vision of a strong future Zebra Qey. Trixie carefully tipped the skin. The water it held had to last each day till the following dusk, when it would be replenished. Provided there was enough to go around. Though she was drilled into the belief that not a drop should be wasted, she scrimped and saved for this moment. It was time to feel like her old self again. Using a hoof, and not her magic, she poured the mouthful of water onto the rag. She could feel the cool life-giving liquid pool in her frog underneath, and her body ached to lap it up. But no, she would get it another way. With care, she took the cloth and placed it on her forehead. The cool, slippery sensation felt heavenly, as days' worth of grime and sweat were wiped away from her coat. Enjoying the feeling she wiped her eyes and allowed the cloth to stay there. Within the moist darkness she imagined she was back home in Equestria. She had grown up in a lavish estate, and yet now when she thought of home, it was not there, but the library back in Ponyville. Spike would be in the kitchen making breakfast and coffee as Twilight would descend the stairs. Her once rival would offer her a bleary-eyed greeting which she would return as the two of them shambled down the steps, following the scent of grounds and syrup. When she got to the bottom of the steps, there he would be. Standing on one side of the kitchen like a living statue, lost in his thoughts, or speaking to the library. His warm grey, shaggy mane obscuring his glowing eyes, his stocky build, flexing underneath the coat of fine moss that substituted for fur quite flawlessly. His smile when he saw her. He may not have been a real pony, but sweet Celestia, what a disguise. She had thought she lost him forever. She had almost given into despair. But then a tiny miracle happened. A miracle named Herb. The little seedling was sitting between the bars of the window, soaking up the morning sun to keep itself alive. It had been separated from Aaron longer than any other of his little drones. That it was still functioning was a small miracle in and of itself. It gave Trixie hope, and the strength to keep going. She finally took the rag off her face. It was time to get to work. Today was their group's turn to work in the camp, rather than the quarry. It was a rotation the master had implemented to ensure the slaves didn't burn out too quickly from the hard work. They made their way to the kitchen building and got to work. They would peel vegetables, cut fruits, cook and serve breakfast and hand out the daily rations of water. As she worked, Trixie let her mind wander once again to her life before all this. Back to Twilight's kitchen. It was the strongest, and most recent happy memory she could cling to. Remembering home, Trixie? Maji asked quietly. Trixie snapped out of her thoughts. How did you know? You had such a happy faraway gaze in your eyes. I imagine it's how I look when I meditate. Aren't you going to tell Trixie not to? Of course not. It's something that gives you strength. You should cherish it for as long as you can. Trixie nodded. Is that what you think about when you meditate? Something like that, said Maji. You two should forget those memories as soon as possible. They will only bring you pain. Gordon growled as he passed them by, hauling a bag of potatoes. Pay him no heed, Maji said gently as Trixie's face fell. Griffins simply deal with hardship like this in a different way. You should hold on to what you love with all your heart, even if it hurts. She went quiet for a moment, then smiled softly. A little schoolhouse near a small farm town. Trixie blinked but didn't interrupt, waiting instead for Maji to elaborate on her own. Maji closed her eyes and a serene expression fell over her face, almost like a veil. It was once a storage shed, but I was able to purchase it on my own. It took months, but with a little help from some of the local families we were able to transform it into something the whole community was proud of. I remember walking across the city, looking for used books. I collected them from libraries and used bookstores, worn and about to be tossed out. I gathered them up in a small box. They were torn, drawn in, but the looks on the children's faces when they opened them for the first time. Many of them didn't know how to read, but it didn't matter. This was a start, a beginning to a whole new world. Trixie couldn't help but smile at the passion in the young mare's voice. That sounds amazing, Maji. It was. She looked around cautiously, searching for wandering ears. The coast was clear for the moment, so she leaned into Trixie and whispered in her ear. My family is well-to-do, I could have had anything I asked for, but the school? It was mine. One of the first things that I did all on my own. My mother scolded me, told me that I could bring several schools about, if I would but ask. My parents would gladly fund such an endeavor and they would put me in charge. I suppose, they were right, I could have but. You wanted to do it for yourself, to blaze your own path. Maji smiled thoughtfully at Trixie. That, and to step out of my big sister's shadow. Don't get me wrong, I love my sister, but she is such a strong figure. I wanted a chance to shine all on your own. To show every pony you could. Trixie finished. Maji nodded, her smile never faltering. I sense it's the same for the great and powerful path you chose. Maji said, doing a little imitation of Trixie. Trixie blushed. It's nothing. Downright selfish compared to what you did. Trixie just wanted to bask in the attention of the crowd. To hear the masses cheer her name. Nonsense. When you speak of it I can tell, it's not so much for you but for others. It's that look. That look on their faces when you show them something amazing. Trixie whispered. I know exactly what you mean. What about your parents? Are they? Trixie began but faltered. They are happily retired from the family business. They have a little estate on the coast in the south where they spend their days. Mom always had a thing about wanting to make her own wine. She never had time to try it before. Now she's got her own little vineyard. I'm not sure what my dad does with his time these days. They lapsed into companionable silence while they resumed their work. Halfway through service, Trixie and Maji were pulled aside by the guards watching over the kitchen. They were being sent up to serve the master's morning meal. A task reserved for the prettiest mares. Trixie briefly toyed with the idea of asking Herb, who was hiding in her mane, to poison the food. But quickly thought better of it. If the poison failed they would surely be punished for the attempt. Most likely even killed. If it succeeded, there would be no one around to keep the guards under control. It was only Weijio's decree that kept the guards from touching the mares. Unless one consented willingly. The mothers of Zebra Qey's future must be willing, not forced. The master had said. That was his word. And here, his word was law. With 2 large trays floating in her magic, and Maji carrying another on her back, they made their way to the master's sanctum. The master always ate with his inner circle, going over the day-to-day and any problems that might require his attention. A long table stood in the center of the hall, with the master sitting at the head. His 6 generals and advisors sat on either side in groups of 3. Quick and quietly, Trixie and Maji began to set the table. Putting down bowls of fruit salad, fresh loaves of pumpkin bread, and 2 large carafes of water. They then stood off to the side and waited while the men finished eating, occasionally being called upon to refill their drinks. Everything was calm and ordinary, until a zebra stallion threw open the doors and hastily made his way to the master's side. "My lord, forgive the intrusion, but I have urgent news." The stallion panted. "Take a breather, then report. What could be so urgent that you interrupt my morning meal?" Weijio asked in a tone that said, this had better be extremely important, or there would be dire consequences. The stallion took several deep breaths. "Word has come down from Pearl Cove, my lord." "It's gone." "Gone? What do you mean gone?" "Exactly that, my lord. Some zebra or something destroyed it. There is no trace of our men." "And what of the slaves?" "Gone as well. We found some scattered tracks heading into the drylands, but they were like nothing I've ever seen before. I don't know how to describe them." Everyone present was silent for a moment. "Master, what do we do? Without the port we have lost a major supply line. Then we will simply have to redouble our efforts on our other supply lines, until such time the town can be rebuilt," Weijio said imperiously. His advisors nodded. Could this have been an attack by the Queen? One of his generals opted. Doubtful. The Queen is a mare of peace, she would seek to negotiate, not order troops to raze a town to the ground. She does not have the stomach for it. Then what could it possibly have been? That is what you must find out for me. Send my best scouts to scour the drylands. Check all nearby cities, villages, farms, and towns. If there are survivors, we must find them and question them. Bring them to me, alive and unharmed. Fail me in this, and you shall be tossed in the pit as food." All those present made quick assurances and promises of success. "Inform the slaves, there shall be no work today. We need to inventory our supplies. Water will be down to half rations. That goes for the guards and officers too. Everyone must chip in, from the lowest to the top." Weijio said as he emptied his glass back into the carafe. "Master!" came a small voice that caused all present to freeze. Turning, Weijio scanned the room, his eyes going to the pair of mares. Trixie managed to stifle a shudder at the warlord's gaze, but failed to hide her shock when Maji dared to step forward. "Forgive this one for her impudence," she said softly, bowing her head reverently, "but if there is to be a holiday from our labors, might your humble servants use this gracious opportunity to better ourselves and ease the burden of our Lord's cause." "How dare you?" One of the generals stepped forward, an ornate wooden cane in hoof. "I should have your ears and tongue removed for your... I would have your skull for speaking for me in my presence." Weijio spoke, not even raising his voice. It was enough for all in the room to back away from the offending zebra stallion. Rather than speak, the general merely prostrated himself as the massive hippo slowly stood and approached. Everyone cringed as the crop was taken from the underling. Dwarfed in his massive ham of a fist, Weijio appraised it as well as the 2 pawns before him. Both spoke out of turn, but one was reverent, holding herself humbly yet undaunted. The other was shivering and right now resembled an ostrich with its head in the sand, rather than a zebra. Looking down, at the general, he snapped the cane in his grip, causing him to whimper. "Presume to speak for me again, and I will have you skinned alive and your body rendered into magical reagents." "Yes, my lord. As you command." 1,000 apologies. Bringing his gaze back to the mare, he could tell she was afraid, but still she stood. Make your request and make it swiftly. I have precious little time and even less patience to deal with frivolous matters right now. Maji prostrated herself further. I have but a humble request, master. That you allow us to try and dig a well. He studied her for a moment before speaking. It has been tried before, with no success. Why should I allow you to try again? Great one, letting us try will cost you nothing, and if we succeed, you still benefit. You won't have to spend so much precious space on the supply caravans for water. And your servants will work harder when well hydrated. Don't think I don't see what you're really after here. You want this well so you don't have to depend on what I so graciously give you. You're trying to claim a sliver of independence. Master, I assure you that's not. Hush, child. I will allow you your little act of defiance. For I am a benevolent ruler, and if this motivates your peers to work harder, then it is but a minor thing to grant. However, if you wish to proceed with this endeavor, you will do so in your own time, and only use whatever supplies you and your fellow slaves have scraped together. I will not invest even a single nail into this ill-conceived venture. Yes, master, this one understands, and thanks you for your great kindness. Maji said, bowing so low she could kiss the ground if she were so inclined. Now be gone from here, girl. I have other matters to attend to. He then turned his gaze back to his generals. And as for you all, you know what to do. I strongly suggest you get to it. Bon Bon looked at the devastation before her. Not a single building was left standing. Torn to shreds as if a typhoon had torn through the town. Half of what she assumed was a pirate ship, judging by its black flag, lay smashed upon the ground, over 100 hoof steps away from the actual docks. As if it had been sheared in half and then thrown by some great force. A lot of the buildings had been burned down. Those that hadn't were smashed to timbers. There were also strange mounds of rock and decomposing seaweed spread out all over town. There was no trace of any pony, yet there was a strong metallic tang in the air, the kind that reminded her all too much of blood. Slowly she and Kivuli made their way through the ruins, looking for any signs or clues. By the Great Circle, what could have done this? Kivuli muttered as he stared at the wrecked ship. I have a few guesses. Agent Drops said ruefully. This had been the sum of all her fears since that day Aaron first came to town. She saw the destruction that he could do when he unleashed the Everfree upon them. What he had nearly done to Lyra. Horse apples to being reformed. The only good monster was one bound in Tartarus, and Aaron was overdue. Putting her own feelings aside, she allowed her clinical eye to take over. The vast expanse of destruction. The leveled buildings, the spread of debris. This wasn't a feeding. It didn't have the same randomness to it. Amid all the destruction there was a discernible pattern. Stepping carefully, the cream-coated mare bounded up a mound of tumbled mortar that once had been a bell tower, allowing her a clearer vantage to assess all of this. She had been right. Her trained eye began to put the scene together, the shattered ships, the busted docks, that had been his entry point. He came from the sea. Rose out like the Kraken of Frosthoof Island. Following that point she could see the swath he cut, toppling buildings. The haphazard falling of debris painting a picture for the seasoned agent. This was not a feeding at all, this was rage. Had his mind finally been overcome? Her hoof went to the concealed pouch within her mane, her thoughts going to the case therein. To the ordnance to keep this from happening. It was looking for something. Kivuli's voice came from her side. Or rather, they. After 4 days of traveling together she should have been used to him by now, but she was still ashamed to say she jumped a bit at his silent appearance. She could sneak up on a pony just fine herself. But Kivuli was silent on a whole other level. The guy was like a liquid shadow. It took a second for his words to echo back to her. What do you mean, they? Kivuli raised a hoof to the entry point. It came from the sea, there. Yes, that much is clear," she affirmed. "But there are multiple tracks coming from the docks, all similar." It was not alone. And if observed carefully, these tracks appear methodical. They were searching. "But how can there be so many when you said there were but two?" "His powers, the being we seek, can spawn small creatures, like extensions of himself. So like a swarm of the locust, these then descended on the town, looking for something," said Kivuli. "But for what?" she pondered aloud. "Something taken from it perhaps. Something valuable enough to raise its ire to the point where it felt justified in leveling the place." They searched through the debris for clues, until they came across something that caught Bonbon's eye. In the ruins of a building adjacent to what appeared to be the town's market square, they found broken chains, smashed pens, and a whole plethora of other items that hinted at only one thing. Was this a slave market? Bonbon asked with rising ire and revulsion as she held up a bent branding iron. It would appear so. He knew something more. As impassive as he was, Kivuli knew more about what was going on here, and while it was not her mission, Bonbon would get to the bottom of it. Examining the brand closely, her stomach churned knowing what this thing did and what it stood for. The sickly sweet scent of charred hide that still clung to it was enough for her to cast it aside with an angry snarl. Steeling her resolve, she examined the broken stage and the smashed cages and pens around them. A very uncomfortable thought wormed its way into Bonbon's mind. What if Aaron was looking for his friend? What was her name? Twixie? If that was the case, then whoever stood in his way was going to have a very, very bad day. This is where the search ended, Kivuli surmised as he ran a hoof over the outturned iron bars of one cage. Whatever, or rather whoever had been in there, wasn't alone in the escape. All around them were signs of a massive breakout. "Did you find them, I wonder?" he said thoughtfully to himself. Bonbon regarded her temporary companion before deciding to press him more. "You seem awfully calm for some pony witnessing what appears to be a massacre." Before Kivuli could answer her, a sound caught her attention. The sound of disturbed rubble crumbling, a quit scrabble and a whispered word. She jumped over the pile of broken stone and timber she was searching through and sprinted towards the source of the sound, only to stumble upon a small group of disheveled-looking zebras and ponies. Some of them brandishing makeshift weapons. One look at her and their eyes widened in near panic. "Stay back," one of them yelled. "Leave us alone. We won't go back. We would rather die." Whoa, relax. I'm not here to hurt you. I'm Agent Sweetie Drops, I work for the equestrian government." One of the ponies in the group spoke up. "A likely story. What the Tartarus are you doing in Zebra Qey then? How can we trust you not to take us back?" The others nodded affirmatively and raised their weapons. Broken boards, an iron bar, a big rock. "Look," Bonbon said, holding up a hoof in a placating manner, "I'm going to slowly reach into my mane and pull out my badge of office, all right?" At their nods she did just that, pulling out a little wallet with a golden horseshoe badge inside. "Only government officers carry these," she said calmly. "We're here to help." The stallion's expression melted into one of utter relief. He openly started to weep as he sagged to the floor, letting his makeshift weapon fall from his grasp. Finally, praised be Celestia, the nightmare is over. Bonbon noticed the slave brands on all of them. She winced in sympathy. She had no time to dwell on it though. She had a job to do. "Can you tell us what happened here? Did you see what did this?" "Yes," said a zebra mare. "We saw it all. 3 days ago." Captain Garrick was in a good mood. They had made a pretty penny selling their captives and whatever cargo they had managed to salvage before the other ship went up in flames. Most of his men had already spent their share in the taverns and brothel of Pearl Cove, and they were in good spirits. But now, after spending more than a week in port, it would soon be time to return to the sea and look for fresh booty. Both the literal and figurative kind. Suddenly every seagull on the docks flew off, squawking in panic. Garrick only had moments to wonder what had spooked them. The sea began to churn as if it were boiling. Then the ship lurched and was lifted high into the air, held by a pair of enormous pincers. The wood of the hull groaned, then shattered under the pressure as the claws tore his ship in half. Garrick had only seconds to take to the air. His ship was tossed like a child's toy. It crashed and tumbled through the streets, ripping the front off several buildings and stores. The supply of black powder in the broken hold tumbled out, one barrel bounced through the doors of a smithy. Said smithy exploded a few seconds later, when the barrel came to a stop inside the large furnace. The adjacent buildings completely collapsed. Bells started to ring, signaling the town was under attack. From the waves emerged a monster so massive it dwarfed the buildings before it. It loosely resembled a crab, like Pseudocarcinus gigas. Its shell made of rock and coral reef, kelp, and seaweed. The ground shook with every step the thing took. It clambered onto the shore, crushing the docks under its bulk. Then something started to fall from its underside. Smaller versions of itself, but still as large as a grown manticore. They began to swarm the dock district and into the town proper. Whenever they encountered a pony or zebra or other creature with a slave brand, they would pick them up and run them back to the docks, putting them inside an ever-growing circle of vegetation to keep them safe. Anyone not marked with a slave brand was attacked. Several guards fought back, bringing spears, swords and axes to bear. Shopkeepers defended their stores with whatever they had on hoof. Broomsticks, shovels, anything. Pirates fought side by side in the streets, wielding whatever weapons they brought with them or could improvise. One managed to cleave open the hard stone shell of a crab monster with a small claw axe, only to be greeted with an explosion of toxic spores from the wound. The entire crab trembled, then burst like a seed pod, blanketing the street in a thick yellow cloud. Several griffins fell, coughing blood as the toxins dissolved their lungs. Screams filled every street. Buildings were burning as the fire from the explosion spread. The giant monster roared as dozens upon dozens of pods were launched from its back. They burst upon impact with the ground, disgorging swarms of bell sprouts that wormed their way into every building, driving the inhabitants into the streets where they were picked off by the crabs. Those fortunate to be on the edge of town made a mad exodus into the wilds beyond, climbing over the wall, or even tearing it down in places. Not many of them made it. And those that did were pursued by a skittering carpet of bell sprouts. Garrick flew higher to stay out of reach of the swarm. But the massive monster was another matter. It turned ponderously, and then he saw its eyes. Glowing, green and hate-filled. He recognized them. "Impossible, we killed you. We killed you!" He screeched as only a griffin could. He was answered by a hail of what looked like pine cones from the monster's cavernous maw that filled the air around him. Then they exploded. Razor-sharp pieces of wood tore through the feathers of his wings, and embedded themselves in his hide like splinters. He began to lose altitude, desperately trying to make it past the walls of the town. The screams of his crew as they were slaughtered below him drilled into his ears. He slammed into the sandy ground, unable to properly slow his descent. The impact blasted the breath from his lungs. He shakily got up and shook his head before he began to run. Something latched onto his leg. Garrick looked down to see a tiny plant with a bulbous yellow head. He smacked it away, only for another to latch onto his other leg. And then another and another. He rolled and kicked and clawed, batting them away as best he could, but they kept coming. Then one of them latched onto his hind leg and spewed the contents of its little bulb head all over his paw. Panic reigned in the slave pens. Frightened slaves huddled together in their cages, wondering what the devil was going on outside. Their handlers were barricading the doors and running around like headless chickens, grabbing whatever weapons they could. It sounded like there was a war going on outside. There was a sudden banging on the doors. "Let me in, for buck's sake, let me in." "No, stay back. Back." Something heavy impacted the doors, pushing them inwards. The thick wooden beam that held them shut creaked and groaned. A second impact saw it start to splinter. And by the fourth it snapped in half. The doors were flung open, and a swarm of plants streamed in, followed by stone crabs. The handlers put up a fierce but altogether brief fight, and were ultimately torn limb from limb. The slaves pushed themselves back to the far side of their cages as best they could when the things started to rip the iron bars out. A young mare whimpered as one of the crabs approached her, expecting to die. She was completely lost with surprise when it lifted her up gently and carried her out with the rest of the slaves. She tried not to look at the devastation going on all around her while the strange monster carried her to a safe area with the rest of the slaves. Elsewhere, Captain Garrick blinked, his mind wondering why he was on the ground. His head was fuzzy. Had he blacked out? Why had he blacked out? A sharp pain from his hind legs drew his attention. When he looked back he screamed. Where his hind legs used to be were two melted stumps from the knees down. Something large suddenly loomed over him, and a pincer closed around his neck, lifting him up. One of the manticore-sized crabs had arrived. "Where is she?" the thing growled. "Where is our mate?" "I don't." The other pincer grabbed his wing and ripped it out of its socket. Blood spurting from the stump. Garrick screamed. "The blue unicorn you took from us. Where is she?" growled the thing. "We sold her." "I don't know." "Please, I don't know." "Sold her to whom?" The thing roared as its pincer snapped shut with a clack, inches from Garrick's beak. "I don't know, the auctioneer, he knows. He's a diamond dog. Green vest. Skinny. PP please." The pincer grabbed again. The other wing was tossed aside. Then his left and right arm. And finally his head. Thus ended the career of Captain Garrick the pirate. The present. I was working in my master's field out there. I saw how that thing tore that pirate apart. The mayor concluded, looking a little green at the memory. Once all the slavers were dealt with, the beasts just set us loose before they collapsed into nothing. That explains the piles of rock and stinking seaweed. Bon Bon thought. "Why did you stay here?" asked Kivuli. "Why did you not flee to the south?" "We tried, but we have injured among our group. They would never survive the trip across the drylands. So we turned back and hid here, in the ruins. Scavenging for supplies," said a stallion. "We need to get these poor souls some help." Bon Bon said. "Yes, I will summon assistance before we depart." Kivuli replied. "What happened to the big monster?" Bon Bon asked the group. "It collapsed back into the sea," said the stallion. "Only one small one emerged from the waves, and it walked off into the drylands." "Did any slavers make it out?" "No more than a hoofful. And I hope that thing catches them soon." The stallion spat with venom in his voice. "They deserve it. No pony deserves to die like that." Bon Bon said quietly. "Lady, do you have a clue what they did to us?" "And no, but..." Bon Bon said, taken aback by the stallion's anger. "But nothing. Those bastards did things to the poor mares. And they made me a..." He went quiet. "A what?" "A gelding," he whispered, causing Bon Bon to cover her mouth in shock. "I hope they all rot in Tartarus." Trixie sat in the slave quarters with her friends, listening to them arguing. "Maji, you can't be serious about this." "I can, and I am," she said calmly. "We are on half rations already and now you want us to go digging in the dirt for a spring that may or may not be there," said Copper Leaf. "No. There is no order, no command. I ask no one to follow me in this endeavor. You're gonna kill yourself, girl, and it's gonna be us that have to take care of you," said Kijani. "The master has had slaves try before and they struck nothing the first 2 times, and then burrowed into that centipede's nest the 3rd time." Gordon snorted. "Do you not see? Maji paused, looking among her crew. If this succeeds, we will be one step closer to being free, one step closer to having something that belongs to us. Our own well. Our own water. He won't let you keep it. He will swoop in and take it," said Windy Sails. "No, he won't. By his own law, he won't. Maji, this isn't some crusade for making a community whole. Isn't it?" She smiled a bit. "I'm being serious. Like Gordon said, it has been tried before." Copperleaf sighed in frustration. "Think about it for a moment. We have 1, maybe 2 days before it's back to business as usual, only with half water rations. How long do you think we'll last working the quarry with so little to drink? If we could dig our own well. The biggest issue being if we can locate a spot that holds actual water." Kijani frowned. "Maybe Trixie can help," Trixie said. "Unless you know a water finding spell, I don't see how," said Windy. "Well, no, Trixie doesn't know such a spell. But Trixie has something better," she said as she gently pulled Herb out of her mane where he had been hiding. "Trixie bets Herb can find water." "What the heck is that?" Copper said, staring at Herb. "Never mind that," said Trixie, waving him off, then turned her attention to Herb. She was in no mood to explain to them where the little sprout came from. "Wadya say, little assistant. Think you can help us find water?" The little bell sprout bobbed its bulbous head affirmatively. "Then we are all set. Leave the first step to Herb and Trixie. We will find the perfect spot for a well." Kivuli's contacts showed up only hours after he sent a signal. Apparently they had been keeping an eye on the region from a small village on the edge of the drylands. A village that had thus far gone unnoticed by the enemy. They took the former slaves to safety, and to get proper treatment for their injuries. Once they were out of sight and she was alone with Kivuli once again, Bonbon rounded on the stallion with fury in her eyes. "All right, you better level with me, mister. Since when does Zebra Qey tolerate slavery and that sort of treatment of any pony? We don't. But the situation is complicated." "Don't give me the 'it's complicated' spielbuster. Remember who you're talking to. Complicated is what you tell the bureaucrats and the press. Give me a straight bucking answer." "Very well, but if you breathe a word of this, they will never find your body," he hissed. Bonbon's gaze narrowed. "Noted. Now cough it up. We've been having a problem with a powerful warlord for the last couple of years. At first it was minor incidents. Then Zebra started to disappear. Eventually he grew bold enough to outright claim territory with the help of a mercenary warband, and then introduced slavery. Almost the entire northern part of Zebra Qey is currently in his grasp, with only the drylands serving as a border between us. According to what intelligence we've been able to gather, he's got some twisted ideal, some insane vision of wanting to make Zebra Qey strong. Reshape it to suit his grand designs. Why has your army not crushed this upstart? We cannot. He holds a valuable hostage. What hostage could be so valuable that you allow him to enslave a third of your kingdom? The Queen's younger sister. You're kidding me. I assure you this is no laughing matter. What's more, the warlord does not actually realize he has the Queen's sister in his grasp. If he did, he would have demanded her surrender by now. We cannot simply send an army to crush him and risk her being injured or killed. That is why we have swept it all under the proverbial rug. If the other countries knew what was going on, they would demand we take action to stop this slaver. But we cannot. I must ask you to keep this situation out of your report until such time we can resolve it ourselves." "You are asking me to falsify my report?" "Yes, for the sake of the young princess, I am. You realize that if this slavering warlord has gotten hold of whoever our destructive friend is looking for, then this is all moot, right? All the more reason for us to locate this hunter, before he finds his next prey." "How exactly did he capture the princess?" Bonbon asked. "Dumb luck," Kivuli answered. The princess is a very hooves-on mare. She was out here in the north, helping out our poorer communities and doing charity work. She has always been a mare of the people, he said with great respect in his voice. She was caught in the middle of a town takeover. And as per usual she had left her personal guard at home. She had a tendency to do that, saying who could possibly wish me harm. That's how she fell into his hooves. Trixie was slowly walking up and down the grounds of Ivory Oasis, holding Herb in one of her hooves. Having received permission to carry out their plan to dig a well, she and Herb were now trying to locate a spot that held water. It was slow going since she was trying to make sure the guards didn't spot him. The little sprout was wiggling two of its vines in front of itself, much like one would use a pair of dowsing rods. It made for a rather odd sight. As she crossed the path between the kitchens and the shed where they kept the mining tools for the quarry, Herb suddenly started bouncing up and down. "Did you find something, my little assistant?" Trixie cooed at the little plant. With no ability to vocalize any sounds, Herb opted to simply bob up and down faster. "All right, show Trixie where," she said as she put him on the ground. Herb wobbled a few steps forward, then started to dig at the earth with his roots, marking a small spot. With Herb safely hidden away in her mane again, and the spot properly marked, Trixie ran to get Maji. Using a beat-up old shovel, and Trixie's magic, they began digging. It was slow going. The ground was hard and dry, and densely packed. The sun beamed down mercilessly, and soon they were drenched in sweat, and only about a foot or two down. "This is harder than I thought," Maji admitted. "Do you want to stop?" asked Trixie. "Buck no," said the zebra mare, a determined glint in her eyes. She grabbed the shovel in her teeth and continued. "Mark my words, we will get this done." Even little Herb was determined to help them dig. Jumping from Trixie's mane, the little sprout started shoveling sand around, using his leaves as scoops. The suddenly Copper Leaf joined them, soon followed by Gordon and Windy Sails. And finally Kijani joined in as well. "You guys came after all," Trixie said, pleasantly surprised. "Well, we couldn't stand watching you two dig on your own. Scoot over. Let's get some actual muscle in on this," Gordon growled. "Just don't throw out your back, old bird," Trixie retorted playfully, making him guffaw. "That will be the day. Just try to keep up, you scrawny mare," he retorted with a grin. Trixie smirked. Challenge accepted. Bon Bon and Kivuli searched the grounds around the ruins of Pearl Cove for several hours. The tracks they found were old and barely visible. A lot of them ended abruptly or spun back on themselves. But they found one pair of tracks several days old that led back to the drylands. They followed the trail until they reached a medium-sized town on the edge of the drylands, outside of slaver territory. Dust Bowl. Bon Bon read the sign outside the town gates. "A little on the nose, don't you think?" Kivuli shrugged. "I suggest we check in with the local garrison. See if any strangers came to town recently." Their meeting with the guard commander went surprisingly smooth. The only new arrival in town other than the usual trade caravan was a lone diamond dog, who came into town a day or so ago, looking rather crazed. "Probably been out in the heat too long," the commander had said. The dog was currently holed up in a room at the local inn, as far as the guard commander knew. No pony else had come or gone since. With a quick thanks, the both of them hurried down the cramped streets of the town to find this diamond dog. The inn they arrived at was a shady-looking building that had seen better days. Almost nothing remained of the paint on its walls except some discolored flakes. Bon Bon and Kivuli pushed open the door, its hinges shrieking like a banshee. They hadn't been oiled in years. The innkeeper was a particularly bored-looking zebra with a pot belly. He stared disinterestedly across the counter as the two of them walked up to it. "Yay!" came the curt greeting. "We understand you have a diamond dog staying here," Bon Bon said. "Yay! What room is he staying in?" "Not telling. Customer privacy and all that. Kivuli leaned forward and whispered something in the zebra's ear, whose eyes widened as he sat up ramrod straight. Second floor, room 3. Sorry for my poor attitude, ma'am, he said to Bon Bon. Bon Bon blinked in surprise and looked at Kivuli incredulously. The okapi shrugged and began to walk up the creaky stairs. Shaking it off, she followed suit. Reaching room 3, she banged her hoof on the door. Open up. Smooth, agent drops, very smooth. Kivuli deadpanned. Sounds of scrambling came from the room, then the sound of a window breaking. Bon Bon motioned at the door, then shoulder-checked it. The rickety old door gave way almost instantly. The two of them rushed into the room only to see the tail of a diamond dog disappear out the window. The window whose glass had fallen out of the frame when the dog had tried to open it. Hey you! Halt! Bon Bon made a mad dash for the window. Looking down, she saw a lanky diamond dog in a faded green vest making a run for it. With no time to spare, she immediately launched herself after him. A grappling hook and line, pulled from her mane, saw her safely descend to the alley floor. She galloped after the dog, who ran as if Nightmare Moon herself was snapping at his heels. They zigzagged through the streets, dodging travelers, carts, and food stalls left and right. Dust Bowl wasn't a very large town, but it was densely packed. The diamond dog pushed a trolley into her path in an attempt to lose her. But Bon Bon gracefully vaulted over it, without missing a beat. Guard business! Some pony stop that dog! She shouted. Several zebra tried to get in the dog's way, but he simply bowled them over. Being rather strong despite his deceptively thin frame, he skidded round a food cart that was selling pies, grabbing one and flinging it backwards. Bon Bon's momentum made evading impossible, and she took said pie full in the face. But she kept running, even as blueberry filling ran down her face and into her mane. When I get my hooves on you! She growled and put on an extra burst of speed. The chase continued down several more streets. Bon Bon was really starting to hate this diamond dog. After the pie to the face, he upturned an apple cart, causing her to lose her footing as she rolled across the apples and crashed into a stack of hay bales. Her mane was full of hay and sticky pie filling, and dust, and would take hours to clean properly. But she refused to give up the chase as this dog was her only lead. They were sprinting towards the town gate, and Bon Bon began to worry she would lose him if he made it through. But just before the dog made it, a shadow descended from overhead, knocking him over into the dirt. Kivuli had arrived. Bon Bon panted as she came to a halt. How did you do that? Ran across the rooftops. Saw what direction you two were going and headed you off. The town only has 2 gates after all. Kivuli deadpanned, as if it was the most normal thing in the world to do. Bon Bon face-hoofed in frustration and fished a pair of hoofcuffs from her mess of a mane. You're coming with us, Buster. No, no, you must let me go. Sniff has to get away before it finds him. It. The monster. It killed all of Sniff's employees, and everyone Sniff knew. Please, let Sniff go. Well, we need to find it. And you are our best bet of doing so. So tough break, Sniff. No. You don't know what it will do to Sniff. You did not see, you were not there. The horror, the screams, Sniff has to get away. The only place we're going is the garrison jail. Bon Bon said flatly. The guard garrison of Dust Bowl doubled as the town's police station. After locking Sniff in one of the cells, Kivuli and Bon Bon took some time to rest and recuperate, write their preliminary reports on the situation. And for Bon Bon to get all the gunk and junk out of her mane. Kivuli also sent a message to check if the slaves they had picked up in the ruins of Pearl Cove had arrived safely back in the south. They then began to question Sniff. The diamond dog proved to be extremely tight-lipped, however, giving them nothing useful. He also kept demanding they release him. Bon Bon found the situation extremely frustrating. Why don't you try and get some sleep, agent drops? Kivuli said. You look like you haven't had a moment's rest since leaving Equestria. Can't. Too much left to do. She insisted. Nonsense, you take a nap, I will keep interrogating the prisoner. Reluctantly, Bonbon relented. Settling into a couch in the barracks, she closed her eyes and was soon dozing gently. Out front at the gates a hooded figure appeared. Slowly walking towards the guard station. The mayor manning the post at the door looked up with a bored expression. Can I help ya, citizen? I heard you are holding a friend of ours, a diamond dog. Ours? The mayor blinked, there was no pony else present. Your friend is just helping us with an investigation, nothing to worry about. The mayor droned in a bored monotone. Tired of dealing with this weirdo already. Can we see him please? The figure asked. No, not yet. He'll be a while. If you wanna wait, that's your business. That's okay, we'll be back. Sure, whatever, the mayor said as the figure disappeared around the corner, then sniffed the air. Do I smell seaweed? Something jumped her, latching onto her face. All she saw was a mass of green before she blacked out. The sound of an alarm bell tore Bonbon from the blissful realm of sleep. Guard Zebra were running to and from, putting on armor and grabbing weapons. What's going on? She demanded, grabbing hold of the nearest one. We're under attack. Someone has breached the gatehouse. Screaming filtered in from down the hallway. A jumbled cacophony of shouts of what is that and there everywhere intermixed with yelps of surprise and alarm. Deeper inside the building, Kivuli looked back from where he was questioning Sniff. He quickly moved over and stuck his head out the door to find out what was happening. The sound of a battle filtered back to him. Stay here and watch him, he said to the guard who was standing off to the side of the room, then bolted out the door. Both Bonbon and Kivuli arrived at the front gate at the same time. The entrance was pandemonium central. A massive swarm of little balls of densely packed seaweed was invading the place. They moved around on slithery little roots that made them look like octopi. Guards were whacking away at them. But for every single one they smashed to pieces, 2 more streamed in. Every now and then one of the things would jump up and make a grab for a guard's face, unleashing a pinkish cloud of smoke once they got a good grip. Anyone caught in the brief pink burst was knocked out, fast asleep. The 2 agents joined the fray, bucking and punching at the mass of little creatures. Their efforts hardly made a difference though. The mass of creatures never seemed to shrink. This is a distraction, Kivuli suddenly said. What? Said Bonbon. Think about it, he grunted, bucking another seaweed octopus. While we're all gathered here to fight these things, the rest of the building is undefended. Realization dawned in Bonbon's eyes. He's come for Sniff. Hurry, back to the interrogation room. We can smell the stench of dog clearly. He's behind this steel door. A flimsy barrier. A blast of acid on the hinges is all it takes. We rip it from the frame and toss it aside contemptuously. There is a guard in the room. He says nothing, just stares in shock. We slap him aside, knocking him unconscious. He's not why we're here. Our target sits cowering in the corner, soiling himself. Pathetic. We grab him by the throat and pull him close. The stench of fear intensifies. You led us on a merry chase, you flea-bitten scrap feeder. But now we have you. Before you die you are going to tell us what we want to know. That's quite enough. Drop the prisoner and surrender. A voice behind us yells. As we focus our senses on the source of the voice we recognize her. But she should not be here. She's accompanied by a rather weird-looking creature. An okapi if our memory does not mislead us. He eyes us warily. His muscles tight like a coil, ready to spring into action. Bonbon. We thought we smelled something sweet. We say. Her jaw tightens at our words. This does not concern you, lapdog of Celestia. Leave us alone. If you're planning to kill him then it does concern me. Haven't you had your fill of bloodshed after killing all those pirates? She barks at us. Those chuckleheads shot us with a cannon and sank us to the bottom of the sea. Then they sold Trixie to this piece of filth, who auctioned her off to another. He knows who took her and where they took her to. Now we're going to make him spill his guts. Wait a moment, if they sank you into the ocean, how in Celestia's name did you survive? We are very hard to kill. That's not an answer. Bon Bon shouted. We can see the tenseness in her face. The fear in the back of her eyes. You want the long version? Fine. We can spare a moment before we tear this rat's guts out. We growl as the diamond dog struggles in our grasp. Here's what happened. The chain shot crashed into me, ripping my arm off and carrying me backwards towards the sea. I blacked out for a moment when I hit the water. But before that happened I managed to use one small burst of magic to shoot little Herb towards the pirate ship. I can't tell if he made it or splashed into the water. When I next regained my vision I was already deep enough that the ships were but blurry silhouettes on the distant surface. The salty water stung as the weight of the cannonballs dragged me down deeper still. The crushing weight of the water made every move sluggish. As if I was wading through peanut butter. I blacked out again, or I think I did. The water above me was a dark green color. I could no longer see the surface, just the last vestiges of light trying to pierce the depths. Unconsciousness found me, again. I woke with a jolt as my body bumped into something solid. Whatever it was fled into the depths. I felt so heavy, like someone had dropped a mountain on me. And cold, so very cold. I couldn't see anything. Even with my magical vision all I saw was darkness. Black as the void. I could feel the shell of my body crumbling. The immense pressure of the deep crushing me like a tin can under a semi-trailer. The salt water didn't just sting anymore, but felt like someone was dragging sandpaper all over my body. Eating away at me bit by bit. And still I sank deeper. The only way I could tell I was moving at all was the ever-increasing pressure. Trixie, I'm so sorry. Not even a day after I promised to be there for you and I've already failed. I'm so sorry, so sorry. Trixie. I see a glow, in the distance. Faint and red, like a dying fire. Am I dead? Am I descending into hell? That can't be right. I don't believe in hell. I feel a small burst of heat as the glow brightens. It momentarily drives back the freezing cold. I feel something. A trickle of power. With a snap my body collapses as the pressure finally becomes too much. Splinters of wood grind against my core. The feeling is so intense that I lose consciousness yet again. I mentally groan as I come to. This is getting really annoying. I feel something warm and solid against my back. Or what's left of it anyway. The light is so much brighter. My vision returns with an effort. I'm lying on the bottom of the ocean. The light I saw turns out to be a volcanic vent. I can see it's opening a few feet away, the water above it boils and churns. That would explain the heat. I'm resting on top of an underwater magma channel. I try to move, but I can't even wriggle. There is so much weight on top of me. This must be how Atlas feels, crushed by the weight of the world. At least the freezing cold is gone. Am I doomed to lie here for the rest of my existence? Until my energy runs out, or the salt water erodes the last of my crushed shell and destroys my core. To die alone, at the bottom of the ocean. What about Trixie? I have to find her. I can't leave her to her fate. Who knows what they will do to her? I have to move. Come on, stupid body, move. I can't die here. I don't want to die here. I want to see Trixie again. I want to hold her in my arms, stare into those beautiful eyes and kiss her tenderly. I want to be there for her when she needs it. When she's sad or scared or simply had a rough day. I want to be there for her, to see her smile and be great and powerful. God damn it, move. I can't leave her in the claws of those pirates. What if they kill her? What if they rape her? No, 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 no. Don't even think that. Trixie is strong, she can handle herself. Oh sweet merciful Luna, I need to get up. I need to get to her. Trixie, Trixie, don't worry, I'm coming for you, sweetheart. Come on, move, move, you pathetic bag of twigs. Oh, for the love of everything holy, help me. I need to get to her. I need her. Trixie. Don't you dare touch her, you filthy fucks. She's mine. She gave her heart to me. I will not let you sully her. Come on, move. Beast. Wake up, you mongrel. I need your power if I'm going to get to Trixie. Make yourself useful for once in your miserable existence and help me. A growl echoes through my mind. Yes, that's it, you filthy monster. Wake up. We have some pirates to track down. I will even let you eat them. Now help me out here. I feel the ground shift underneath me. Tiny bits of volcanic rock rise up and cling to me, forming a shell to keep the water out. I can't move my body, but with our combined rage I can muster enough power to move the earth. Ha, hee hee, ha ha ha, ha ha hey ha ha hey ha 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 ha. The ocean floor cracks and shifts underneath me. More and more pieces of stone cling to me. I push myself upright. The pressure tries to shatter my newly formed shell, but I thicken and strengthen it. I will not be denied. We will not be denied. One step, then another. It's not enough. 2 legs can barely keep me upright. I need more. Crabs live down here, don't they? Fine, I'll be a crab. More legs join my body. Moving becomes easier now. I slowly begin to walk. Just hang in there, Trixie. We're coming for you. I reach out with my power, deep into the earth. I draw on the world's energy. With my legs firmly on the ground, I have no problem drawing on the limitless supply of power. I send out a pulse of magic, along the ground. I can feel the topography for miles in all directions. It's not enough. I need more. And so I take in more. I send out the pulse again. Stronger this time. It travels along the ocean floor like a wave, until I feel the terrain start to incline. That way lies the coast. I turn in that direction and walk. I walk for I don't know how long. It must have been several days, but I can't tell for sure. Time has no meaning down here in the darkness. I can't see a thing, using only my earth magic to guide me. Something suddenly brushes against me. Something organic. It's huge. I feel it bite down on me. I can't tell what it is, but it won't deter me from my path. I ram my armored fist into it and then skewer it with spikes of stone. It tries to pull back, but I morph the spikes into barbed hooks and keep it trapped. It struggles against me. I skewer it more. The thrashing grows weaker. I unfold my armored shell like a giant clam and suck the thing in, devouring it whole. I don't care for its licorice-like taste, but it bolsters my power reserves, and that is all I care for right now. I resume my way. The seabed begins to rise slowly. I follow it upwards. The black abyss of the sea suddenly takes on a dark blue-green tone. I quicken my pace. Eventually the color changes again, the world above growing lighter, and I sense something new along the seabed. Plant life. Kelp, sea grass, seaweed, and algae. I immediately reach out and absorb what I can. As I do, something inside me begins to change. The composition of my core itself shifts to take on new characteristics. I can only imagine what it looks like now. I carefully open my stone shell and let the seawater in. It no longer stings. In fact, it feels welcoming. And now that I'm no longer so insanely deep underwater, I feel something else. Herb. He had moved out of my range, but now I can feel him again. He's on the move, steadily going towards the direction of land. He must still be on the pirate ship. The pirates. I will murder those fucking flying chickens for what they did to me and Trixie. The beast bays for blood, and I agree. We resume our path, grabbing whatever plant life we can, and adding it to our body. We need more. If we're to take on a whole ship of them, we need lots more. More plants, heavier armor. This coral reef will do. We rip it out of the seafloor and add it to our shell. We need to be bigger. Big enough to split that ship in half and rescue Trixie and the crew. But mostly Trixie. More, we need more. Our mate is in danger. We will show no mercy. We will bear down on them like the Leviathan of legend. The tales of their destruction and suffering will be a warning to everyone on this planet. You keep your limbs off our mate. She is for us alone. The water grows shallow, something hooks onto us. A fishing line. A small nuisance to deal with. A quick swipe with some razor vines solves the problem. We sent out another burst of magic. There it is, our quarry. Lying at anchor in the port. Face our retribution, you filthy parasites. That's when you destroyed Pearl Cove, isn't it? Bon Bon asked as we finished our tale. We have seen your work first, Hoof, the Okapi said. Then you know better than to get in our way. Wait, if you could sense your little... whatever. Why are you after this guy? We lost the connection again and have been unable to re-establish it since. Something has changed. We don't know if it's us or it. Why do you keep referring to yourself as we? You're not royalty, so knock it off. It's creepy. Enough. We roar, and the both of them tense up like springs, ready to bolt. We have wasted enough time talking. We have to find Trixie. We turn our attention back to the diamond dog in our grasp. Tell us what we want to know, and we will make your end quick. A click behind us makes us look over our shoulder. Bon Bon has raised a tiny crossbow at us. Don't. I'm warning you. We will tell you one last time, do not interfere. I can't let you just kill him. I understand how you must feel, but... you understand nothing. Our mate is in danger. This waste of space knows where we can find her, and we will wring that information from him before we tear him apart. You can't. We can do whatever we want. Not on my watch. I can't stand here and let you do that to him. Why do you protect this scum? What if it was Lyra's life in danger? Would you still protect him then? Her eyes narrow, and we can hear her teeth grind against each other. Some pony did hurt Lyra, and despite that, I let them live, but he is pushing his luck right now. You didn't try because that cunt Celestia was standing right behind us. Besides, you couldn't kill us on your best day with an army at your back. So don't push your luck, little prey. How dare you? How dare you call her that, you psychotic murderer? She's a better pony than you could ever hope to become in a million moons. Yes, because she is so sweet and merciful and benevolent. A shining example to all, and let's not forget that the sunshines are of her arse too. If she was such a great and benevolent leader, why did she send you after us? Tell us you're not here to drag us back so she can lock us in Tartarus. Or kill us if that proves impossible. Tell us you simply came to deliver a message and wish us good luck. We pause for just a second. No? See. She just could not leave well enough alone. Because she is a meddlesome old bat who needs to keep her muzzle out of our business. If she was truly such a benign leader, she would not send a monster hunter to fetch us. So fuck her. Fuck her right up her shiny white ass. Bon Bon's expression is beyond priceless. Completely catatonic with pure outrage. A little less posturing, you two, if you please. Kivuli deadpanned. We are getting nowhere. We stare each other down for a moment. Aaron, for the love of harmony. Can't you see it? You are too dangerous. If you don't believe me, look what you have done in a matter of days since coming to Zebra Qey. You slaughtered an entire city. That's not our. They were scum. Nice way to rationalize it. How convenient. You were brought on charges for killing one dragon the first time. You butchered over 100 souls. How do you expect to evade those charges? We get him to talk. Kivuli intercedes stoically, shocking all present, including the dog. If you can help us find Weijiomoha's camp and help liberate it, consider all charges dropped. Kivuli, you can't. I can. You're lying. You're lying to us. The Okapi stepped in front of Bonbon, obscuring her shot much to her growing indignation. I can guarantee it. We study him closely for a moment. He's holding someone you care about, isn't he? Kivuli nods. Nice to see at least one of you has his priorities straight. How can you call this justice? She shouts at him. Let us pose a simple question for you, Bonbon, we interject. Bonbon swallows her anger, but remains tense as a bowstring. What kind of question? A question a character in fiction once asked another. It goes as follows. Given the chance, what do we do to those who hurt the ones we love? We hoof them over to the proper authorities, and see that justice is done. She answers almost instantly, though her words sound slightly hollow. Wrong. We roar. Those that hurt or threaten our loved ones, we destroy. Mind, body, and soul, and cast them screaming into the abyss. We turn to our captive, whose eyes grow large as we transform, turning into an enormous fang-filled maw that drips with hissing acids. Now scream for us. And scream he does. The terror in his voice is like the sweetest honey as we begin to pull him into us. As one of his hind legs makes contact with the acid and the skin begins to blister, his screams become like the shrieks of a pig in a slaughterhouse. The bow twangs as the bolt is launched. It speeds towards us, as if in slow motion. We put the dog in the way of the shot. The bolt slams into his belly with a wet thud. The expression on Bonbon's face is one of pure horror. Blood leaks out around the wound and drips onto the floor. Help me, the auctioneer croaks weakly, pawing at the wound. It burns. Bonbon is still frozen in horror, but the Okapi steps forward. Just tell him what he wants to know and we will get you medical attention. We begin to protest, but Kivuli holds up a hoof, glaring at us with an unreadable expression. The dog whimpers, then spills his guts. Telling us exactly how to reach Weijiomoha's hidden compound. Thank you, says Kivuli to the diamond dog, then gives us a nod. Do as you will. What? No. Bonbon yells, coming out of her daze. It's too late. We skewer the dog like so much meat at a butcher's shop. He's dead before he can even register the pain. Far too swift an ending for our taste, but we have our mate to find, and have wasted enough time with this indulgence. Bonbon lets out a frustrated scream. Why? You didn't have to do that. Kivuli, what the buck? Why did you? The greater good. The Okapi answers calmly. Bonbon stares at him silently. We know at last where Weijio hides. He no doubt has many slaves there, as well as our princess. What is one criminal's life compared to theirs? At last, someone who makes sense, we growl. You're both monsters. Bonbon says through gritted teeth. Buck you. Wake up and realize already that the world isn't all sugar and spice and everything nice. Celestia shelters you ponies way too bucking much. If I have to kill one criminal to save 100 of my fellow Zebracans, then that is a good trade. Kivuli shouts, almost livid. Bonbon is completely taken aback by the normally quiet Okapi's outburst. But at what cost? She manages to say. Kivuli realizes he's yelling and composes himself. Closing his eyes, he says, a steep one. When my journey across the Great Circle is done, I will have much to answer for. But the lives of those I have saved shall be my offering on the scales of judgment, and my testament in this world. He takes a deep breath before he continues. It's ugly and unfair, and you can soothe your guilty conscience later. Right now we have a whole lot of slaves to save. Your people as well as mine. If you wish to report my actions later, I will not stop you. For now we have many days walking ahead of us. I suggest you send a message back to your airship. We will need it to help evacuate the survivors. It had taken them all afternoon yesterday, and all of today's morning, but the well was almost finished. The group was in high spirits as they worked on finishing the project. Let's shore this side up some more, said Copperleaf, adding another support beam to the frame that kept the well from collapsing. The well was now a good 16 feet deep. The only way in and out a simple rope ladder they had made from jungle vines. Trixie dug a little slower. Her horn glowed with a simple light spell, allowing them to actually see what they were doing down there. Something wrong? Asked Maji. The opposite exactly. Look. She pointed with her hoof. The ground is moist. We're almost there. They dug deeper still, until they hit a layer of rock. They were so close now. They pushed themselves a little further, a little harder. And a few minutes later they struck paydirt. As Maji brought her pick down one final time, a steady stream of water began to rise from the crack in the stone. Cool, clean, fresh water. A cheer went up. They had done it. Trixie splashed her hooves into the rapidly growing puddle, rubbing some into her face to clean the sweat and grime. Then she hugged Maji. We did it, she cried out in joy. We did it, we did it, we did it. Yes we did, she said with a big smile. They were all sharing cheers and congratulations around the newly dug well when Weijio appeared, flanked by a dozen of his guards. Everyone quickly dropped into a bow. I see you dug your well, and actually managed to find water, he said. Yes, great one. Maji answered. Using your own tools no less. Yes, great one, we used whatever we had on hoof, plus a little magic. Weijio nodded approvingly. And the wood? We cut down a few of the smaller trees along the path to the quarry, great one. Ah yes, the ones that were starting to get in the way. I approve, he said with a nod. And the nails? I don't know. She looked to the others. Who got the nails? Kijani raised a trembling hoof. Where did you get them, Kijani? Maji asked. She didn't answer. Kijani, please tell me you didn't. When I went over the supply list this morning, imagine my disappointment when a whole bucket was missing from the inventory, said Weijio. Taken without permission. One might even say they were stolen. We needed nails to keep the well from collapsing. I didn't think they would be missed. Kijani stuttered. Such an unfortunate turn of events, said Weijio. Great one, please, she meant no harm, Maji said. But Weijio held up a hand to silence her. Her intentions do not matter. I simply can't permit anyone to steal what rightfully belongs to me. Thievery must be punished. Those who do not listen to my rules don't require both ears. The guards moved to seize Kijani, who started to flail and cry. Great one, please, it's only her first mistake. Show her leniency, Maji begged. One guard drew a dagger while the other held Kijani's ear between his teeth. Weijio held up a hand to forestall them. And how would she learn from her mistakes without consequence? Great one, the mistake was mine. I led the group. I should have checked, should have made sure. So, if punishment is to be dealt, then it should be me, not her. She did the act, but ultimately I was responsible. Maji, no. Kijani cried. Weijio fixed her with a gimlet's eye. You would willingly take her place? Maji swallowed. Yes. Weijio stared at her a moment longer, then nodded to his men. Release her. They moved to grab Maji instead, but Weijio waved them off. You have shown nothing but great respect. And great courage. For that, I shall be merciful. I will not take your ear. But instead I will take what you created using what was rightfully mine. This well belongs to me now, and as such is off limits to you. All of you are confined to your quarters for the rest of the day. Maji bowed low. Yes, master. Thank you for your mercy. It truly knows no bounds. Indeed. Be warned though, little thief, he said to Kijani. This was your first mistake. The moment you make a second one is the moment you find yourself in the pit. Now begone, all of you. The group silently slunk back to their cell in the slave quarters. Kijani couldn't stop shaking. The journey to the slavers' compound, laughably called Ivory Oasis, is but a blur to us. We left the town with all haste and never stopped. Even when the two equines begged us to take a break, we kept going. We simply slung them across our back like baggage. They were none too pleased, but we give zero fucks. Either be carried or be left behind. Those were their options. After just 2 days and nights running at maximum speed, we arrived at the edge of the jungle. The dense vegetation slowed us none. We used our power to simply move the offending flora out of the way. The one called Kivuli kept staring at us the entire time we worked our magic. We do not like him. He smells like trickery. We arrived at the compound just after dawn. The red rays of the morning sun makes it so that the entire place looks like it's bathed in blood. Which is something we will soon make a reality. We move to begin our attack, but Bonbon blocks our path. Wait, let's see what we're up against first, shall we? She said as she fished a spyglass from her mane. We wait impatiently while the two of them plot and scheme. Our patience grows thinner by the minute. How do we do this? Bonbon whispered to Kivuli. There must be more than 100 guards down there. We stood up, no more waiting. Wait, Aaron, what are you? We walk out of the tree line and into full view of the compound. The sentinels at the gate raise their weapons, as do the ones in the guard towers. A stomp of our foot shakes the whole of Ivory Oasis as a deep crevasse opens underneath the gate, swallowing it, the guard towers and the zebra manning them, before slamming shut once again. The slave quarters briefly trembled as the earth shook. Maji fell off her bunk, hitting the floor with a thud. Some of the walls cracked as the wood shattered under the strain. What's happening? Said Windy Sails. Is it an earthquake? Asked Kijani. But we're not even close to any fault lines. Grunted Gordon as he picked himself up off the floor. Wagio Moja. You have someone that belongs to us. Hoof her over or we will slay all of your followers and tear you limb from limb. A voice rang out across the compound. Aaron. Trixie's eyes grew almost impossibly large. Aaron. Wait, your special some pony? I thought he was dead. Asked Copperleaf. Trixie told you. She told you he was alive. Aaron. Aaron, over here. She yelled out of the window. He cannot hear you. Maji said. There's too much noise and we're too far away. Trixie didn't even hesitate. She charged her horn and set off a firework spell. A single streak of green rose into the air where it exploded with a shower of cyan sparks. It formed a brief image of an arrow pointing at the slave barracks. And above the arrow floated Trixie's cutie mark. No sooner had she completed her spell or an alarm bell started to ring and guards appeared at the door. Who used magic? One of them yelled, brandishing a whip. As the only unicorn present, it didn't take a genius to figure out Trixie was the guilty party. She glared at them defiantly. You know the penalty for using magic. The guard said with sadistic glee as one of the others brings in some bolt cutters. Your horn privileges are hereby revoked. As they moved to grab her, Gordon stepped in front of Trixie. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Stand aside, slave, if you know what's good for you. Are you stupid? Gordon asked calmly. Do you hear the ruckus out there? So what? Our forces will have it under control soon. The lead guard snarled as they briefly listened to the sounds of battle. And what if they don't? What if you guys get you sorry striped arses hoofed? I don't know how many are attacking, but one of them is apparently very powerful, and he's here for her. He said while pointing his clawed thumb at Trixie. Her lover, in fact. What do you imagine he'll do to the guy who cut off her horn? The guard's expression falters. Suddenly looking a bit nervous. That's what I thought, said Gordon. Just pretend it never happened. We'll make sure she behaves. Everyone out. The lead guard snarled at his cronies. But boss. I said out. You saw nothing. Understand? Sure boss. They mumbled as they exited the slave quarters and slammed the door shut. The click of the lock signaling their departure. Thank you. Trixie whispered to Gordon. Just pray that your lover wins this, or we might all be in deep shit. He grumbled. These pathetic worms are the ones that took our mate? Preposterous. They fall before us like reeds before the scythe. We crush them with our fists. We smash their bodies upon the ground to lie there broken and lifeless. It pleases us. We will kill them all and build a throne from their corpses. An explosion of light draws our gaze. Our mate. Her cutie mark lights up the sky. She is here. We smash aside the trio of guards that attempt to bar our way. They impact the wall of a hut with enough force to break most of their bones. Another blocks our path, thrusting a spear into our chest. It sticks there, and we wrench it out of his hooves. His eyes widen in fright. We grab him by the skull and squeeze. His screams paralyze the others with fear, and they flee in terror as we rip the spinal cord out of his back. That thing is your lover, Copperleaf said incredulously. He has some issues. Trixie grimaced. All of them were staring out of the tiny windows of the slave quarters, trying to see what's going on. They watched as the massive wolf centaur form of Aaron cut his way through guard after guard, getting ever closer to them. Merciful Creator! Kijani whispered queasily as she watched the guard lose his spine. Trixie said nothing. She had witnessed Aaron's violent outbursts before, but something felt wrong. It's as if he was deliberately trying to be as cruel as possible. As if reading her thoughts, Gordon said, "It's a message. A warning to anyone stupid enough to mess with you. Try it and you will regret it dearly." The Griffin tribes of old would put the heads of their enemies on pikes to send the same message to all would-be challengers and conquerors. Another corpse bounced off the walls. He's taking it a bit far though. Gordon deadpanned. It did not take long for the guards to realize that rushing at this creature with melee weapons was a death sentence. Instead they took up positions with every bow and arrow and other ballistic weapon available. Dozens of arrows rained down on Aaron's rampaging form while a group of guards desperate tried to pull a ballista into a suitable firing position. They soon learned that even at range they weren't safe from this thing, as blasts of corrosive liquids and explosive fruit and seeds came hurtling in their direction. And that was only if the ground didn't swallow them whole. Several of the huts creaked and groaned as the shifts in the ground cracked walls and foundations. One such shift destabilized the slave quarters, the misalignment of its walls causing every door to be jammed shut, trapping everyone inside. Bon Bon and Kivuli observed the chaos wide-eyed from their hiding place. "In all my time on this world I have never seen its like," Kivuli quietly muttered. "Our friend is like a primal force of nature. That's one way to put it." Bon Bon scoffed. "He reminds me of the stories the village elder used to tell. Myths of the olden times, when the guardians of the world walked among their children." Bon Bon said nothing, not wanting to insult Kivuli over what she considered superstitious nonsense. Instead she focused on the battle below. "We need to get in there," she said. "Agreed, but we should remain unseen until we are needed," Kivuli added. "Think you can manage to stay hidden?" Agent drops. "Are you questioning my skills?" she retorted hotly. "Not at all. I simply imagine it is hard to remain unnoticed with such a garish mane color," he said, pointing at her streaks of candy pink. Hey! Bon Bon whined, but Kivuli had already moved forward, vanishing into the underbrush. Master, we cannot hold it. The creature is unstoppable. One of the panicking generals said as he bowed before Weijio. Our weapons have no noticeable effect, Great One. We need your magic. Weijio rose imperiously and gathered items from his cabinet of reagents before stepping outside. Parts of the shattered ballista smashed into the wall of his sanctum, right as he emerged from the door, yet he stood unflinching. He calmly strode towards the battle. He observed the fighting with dispassionate eyes. Analyzing, plotting. Suddenly he lifted his arm and threw a handful of vials towards the monster. As they burst, colorful smoke filled the air, surrounding the creature. Enough of this, he said coldly. You have caused enough trouble for one day, creature. It is time for you to cease this nonsense and submit to the will that is Weijio Moha. Hearing those words sends a new surge of hatred through us. We must exact vengeance upon he who took our mate. We turn to behold this doomed fool. A fat hippo in a suit? This is the feared master, Weijio Moha? He looks like a child's rendition of a voodoo doctor. Does he have friends on the other side? We will send him to meet them. We will rend and tear and drink his blood. We start to move towards him, shifting to an appropriate combat form. We choose a massive lion, because it's time to show this fool who the true king of the jungle is. Our claws scrape across the ground, tearing deep gouges in the earth. Weijio Moha, time for you to die. I think not, creature. He says calmly as he lifts a zebra skull. Or what we assume is a zebra skull, decorated with runes, covered in crushed gem dust. The eyes of the skull suddenly erupt with a blazing purple light. The beast is torn away, shoved back into the deep recesses of my mind. The fog of rage that was clouding my thoughts and actions lifts like a veil. I can think calmly and rationally for the first time in I don't know how many days. And with that comes the horrible realization of what a complete idiot I've been, giving in to my dark, base desires. I'm not one to shy away from violence, but what we, did this past week, it sickens even me. We've all had these thoughts, don't deny it, about getting the most terrible revenge possible on those who wrong us. But to actually do it. I can't dwell on that, not now. Not until this is over. I try to take another step forward, to crush this fat bastard, but I can't move. Whatever magic he is attacking me with has me frozen like a statue. It feels familiar, I've encountered it before. It's like the magic Zakora uses to keep her home safe from predators and the supernatural horrors of the Everfree. Only a lot more potent. Weijio speaks. What a curious being you are. So much power, so much rage. He circles me slowly, inspecting me. Curious, I sense two spirits inhabiting the same vessel. Interwoven, yet apart. One of you feels calm, if a little angry. The other is like rage and hate personified. Curiouser and curiouser. He completes his circle and looks me in the eyes. Just out of my reach. Come a little closer you fuck, so I can bite your face off. Your potential for destruction is clear. I can make use of that. It takes a great deal of effort to lift my head and speak. I will not serve you. I came to get someone you took from me. Then it seems your quest will end in failure. But that is fine, for I shall grant you new purpose. I just told you, I will not. Silence. I lose the ability to speak, try as I might, not a word comes from my throat. I feel the beast struggle to roar. But it too is held fast. You are nothing but an abomination. A spirit of reason and a spirit of rage, forced into the same vessel. You are not even fit to be a slave in my kingdom. But you can make a great tool. Or one of you can at least. A tool I shall wield to lay waste to those who would oppose me. Rejoice in the knowledge that you will be useful. I shall give your existence meaning. I try to fight his control, but it is as if my very mind has been clapped in irons. And he pulls the chains to make me move. It is fortunate you found your way to me. I have studied the knowledge of some of the greatest shaman who ever walked these lands. With their knowledge, my army of devoted, my slaves, and now you, I shall conquer these lands from coast to coast. Now I shall bind upon you my command. He says as he raises the skull before me. The light in its eye sockets intensifies. Ancient Loa of shadows, bind the spirit in this form to obey my directive. I feel something, like ice water being drizzled over your head and running down your neck. Except that it's all happening in my mind. Stop, stop. You will go to Kipajikito, you will cut a swathe through the city, smash the gates of the White Palace and slay the Queen and all who dare stand in the way. Let nothing stop you. Let nothing sway you. You shall not be stopped by bargaining, reasoning, or compulsive magics. You will follow my command and mine only. When you are finished, you will come back here and present the Queen's head. I feel it, like hot needles being driven into my skull. I try to push back, to take back and retain control. But the harder I try, the deeper those hot needles sink into my mind. So painful, I can't hold on. So long as the fetish remains, your will is mine to command. Go now, and complete your task. I try to fight, the pain is blinding. Then something grabs hold of me and stuffs me in a cage. The beast takes the reins, following the magical directive if only to make the pain stop. And I am left screaming in a dark corner of my mind as it walks out the camp, and runs into the jungle. Kivuli and Bonbon looked at each other in horror, having overheard everything from their hiding place atop a nearby roof. They managed to sneak in the wake of Aaron's rampage. You must stop him. Kivuli hissed to her. Oh, now you want me to stop him? Bonbon snarked back, keeping her tone a whisper. You alone have the one weapon that can. You said so yourself. For the sake of every zebra in Kipajikito, slow him down at least. I will try to reach the fetish and undo Weijio's magic. And what if you get caught? Then I shall die. We shall all die. Now go. The mood in the slave quarters was black as the void. Trixie sat staring at the wall brokenly. She had come so close to freedom, only for it to be snatched away. Her hopes dashed into tiny pieces. The others tried their best to console her, but their hearts were not in it. A sudden disturbance outside drew their attention. Sounds of a brief scuffle followed by a quiet thud, then the door was forced open. It took some doing to get the darn thing to budge from its misaligned frame. Then a hooded individual entered. Maji seemed to recognize him immediately. Kivuli. Is that you? Yes, said the figure, bowing low. I've come for you, my princess. Princess? Everyone gaped. Is that true? Trixie asked. Maji blushed, looking extremely embarrassed. Yes, she said quietly. My sister, the one I told you about, is Queen Mariani, ruler of all Zebra Qey. Everyone stared at her for a minute, trying to process that the sweet young, hooves on zebra mare they had all come to know so well turned out to be a member of the royal family. I can't believe this. Trixie said. Trixie spent almost 2 days digging in the mud, with royalty. Maji just smiled sheepishly. Please, I'm nothing special. I'm still the girl you know, just Maji. I came to get you out, Highness. Kivuli interrupted. We need to leave, now. What? And abandon the others? Never. Said Maji. Princess, I need to get you to safety. With you out of the way, the army can come back here someday and liberate the place. And what of my friends? I cannot protect a whole group. I am sorry. I'm not leaving without them. Princess, please, we need to go before they recover from the chaos the Aaron creature caused. Yes, about him, did you hear the master's words? Kivuli nodded slowly. Then you know what is at stake, we need to stop him. I sent the agent from Equestria after him. She has a weapon that can kill him. With luck they will annihilate each other and we can keep this whole incident quiet. Maji stared at him in horror. You cannot mean that. Kivuli, when did you become so ruthless? When they took you. He mumbled angrily under his breath. Maji slowly walked up to him and took his face in her forehooves. Kivuli, my loyal shadow. I know you think you failed me that day, but there was nothing you alone could have done. But there is something we can do now, all of us, together. We can make this right, for every zebra, every pony. So I'm asking you, help us. Kivuli stood silently, his face torn with indecision. At long last he let out a shaky breath. What would you have me do, my princess? We fight for our freedom. Trixie said. You cannot be serious. Help us free the other slaves. We will rally everyone and take our freedom. The time for sitting around has long since passed. Maji said, her voice full of passion as she stood tall. And for a moment, Trixie could see it. She saw a ghostly image of Maji wearing a crown and royal regalia. Looking every bit the part of a strong, passionate leader. I cannot guarantee your safety if we do this. You don't have to. She's got us, said Trixie. Standing beside Maji, the others lining up behind them. All of them had a steely determination in their eyes. What's the plan? Said Copperleaf. Free the other slaves, take out Weijio's forces, smash into his sanctum and break the spell. Then we burn this place to the bucking ground and piss on the ashes. Said Gordon. I can think of worse plans. Said Kijani as she hoof-bumped his claw. Their course of action set, they moved to put it into action. The first thing they did upon exiting their quarters was to raid the tool shed. A quick bit of magic took care of the lock, and everyone armed themselves with shovels, picks, and axes. Gordon in particular seemed rather gleeful as he hefted 2 logging axes in his claws. They were just about ready when a guard stumbled upon them. Hey! What are you slaves doing in there? He growled, grabbing for his whip. For Zebra Qey! Kijani screamed, smacking the guard in the face with a shovel. He was out cold before he hit the ground. Scream a little louder, why don't cha? Copperleaf grumbled. I doubt they heard you on the moon. Bucket, things were gonna get loud anyway. Let's do this. A loud cacophony outside disturbed Weijio as he stood over his cauldron. His normally collected expression turned into an irritated scowl as one of his servants entered and bowed low. Master, forgive the intrusion, but what is it this time? What is going on out there? The slaves, master, they've broken into open rebellion. Weijio's expression darkened even further. His hands tightened into fists as he ground his teeth. He took a deep breath and collected himself. No doubt they hope to capitalize on the weakened condition of our security forces. They will be shown the error of their ways. Sound the general alert. End this revolt and bring the ringleaders to me. They will be made an example of. Right away, Great One. His flunky bowed and scraped as he made his exit to organize the troops. Bon Bon galloped as fast as she could. She had to intercept Aaron before he left the jungle. It would be incredibly dangerous to fight him there with his powers. But if they got out onto the open grounds of the savannah, she knew she would never catch up with him. Not without running herself to the edge of death. Their trip up here had shown her just how fast he could be out on the open, with his ability to shapeshift and virtually endless stamina. No, she had to make her stand here. Spotting him a slight distance ahead between the trees, she pushed herself further and hopped up into the branches. Using all of her training, she hopped from tree to tree, overtaking him and dropping several smoke bombs. The moment they went off, he halted, letting out a deep throaty rumble. A clear warning. She dropped from the trees, blocking his path. His appearance was frightening. His form constantly seemed to shift, with spikes and sharp edges appearing and retracting at random. As if his entire being was in flux. The massive maw he currently sported warped between that of a wolf, and something looking altogether more dragon-like, or some other large reptilian thing she had no word for. She shook herself. No time for doubt, no time for fear. She was a monster hunter, and she had a job to do. Aaron, if you are in there, now would be a good time to snap out of it, she said as she stared into those completely unreadable pools of now purple light that formed his eyes. A tiny tremor in the ground was all the warning she got. If not for her earth pony senses, she would have been caught completely off guard. She jumped away a fraction of a second before the ground rose up as two slabs of stone smashed together. Had she not moved, she would be flat as a pancake. Her near impossible escape left no room for any sort of graceful landing. She slammed shoulder first into the ground, rolling to mitigate the damage from the fall and whipping out one of her gadgets in the same motion. She hurled it in his direction as she took cover behind a large twisted tree. The boxy little device she hurled at him contained an oversaturated storm cloud. Compressed into the tiny little box, it went off the second it sprung free, which happened when it impacted his chest. The storm cloud unloaded its entire charge into Aaron in one enormous lightning bolt that split his chest in two. The accompanying thunderclap was deafening, drowning out the beast's angry roar. Bon Bon had no time to rest. Already she could see the wound start to regenerate as blackened wood was pushed out, and replaced by fresh sapwood. Fishing into her bag of tricks once more, she pulled out two more little boxes. "Over here, you stupid monster!" she yelled before running off. With a snarl, the beast gave chase. The instinct to hunt and kill momentarily overpowering even the magical directive. With the thing now in full pursuit, Bon Bon tossed the two little boxes into the bushes on either side of the path. When the beast passed between them, they popped open, shooting out dozens of strands of steel wire, forming a sloppy but effective set of snares, entangling it. With its limbs wrapped up, the beast lost its footing and came crashing down to the ground, snarling and fighting against its bonds. While the beast struggled in her trap, Bon Bon took a few precious seconds to take a breather. "Come on, Aaron, fight it. Don't make me do this," she said while loading her miniature crossbow with one of the special bolts Celestia had entrusted to her. "I don't like killing. I hate it. I hate having to put down monsters. But I can't let you do this, I can't let you go through with what that bastard ordered you to do. So snap out of it. Don't make me do this to you." Her hoof trembled with indecision as she raised the crossbow. The steel wires snapped with a loud metallic twang, and the beast lunged at her. She jumped back and let the bolt fly. "I'm sorry." Ivory Oasis had become a bloody battleground. More and more slaves joined the uprising, grabbing whatever weapons they could improvise. Guards were overwhelmed and beaten to within an inch of their lives. Months of cruelty was being repaid with interest. And in the middle of it all was Trixie and her group of misfits, leading the rebellion. "Forward, my friends! For your freedom!" Maji shouted as a group of slaves bashed down the doors of the barracks where several guards had barricaded themselves. They fired crossbows at the slaves from the windows. Several of them fell, screaming as bolts slammed into barrels and limbs. Kivuli barely had time to push Maji out of the way of an incoming bolt, the deadly projectile only missing her by inches. "Be careful, my princess. Please. I have no desire to be the one who tells your sister you died. I will endeavor not to perish this day then," Maji called back with a small smile. "To the sanctum," Gordon growled. "It's time to string that fat bastard up." Several of the others loudly proclaimed their enthusiasm for this course of action and began sprinting towards the Great Hall, intent on bashing down its doors. Several unicorns were pounding the doors with spells. But runes carved into the doorframe dissipated the energy before it could do any real damage. They would have to bash it down the old-fashioned way, with determination and elbow grease. Wasting no time, those slaves armed with axes began to chop away at the doors like lumberjack berserkers, until Weijio suddenly threw them wide open. "Enough!" His voice boomed out. "Cease this at once! I command it!" Your days of giving orders are over, tyrant! Shouted Maji, drawing cheers from the crowd of slaves. I said, enough! Weijio rumbled as he raised a gnarled, rune-engraved cane. The runes began glowing, and suddenly Maji fell to her knees. The brand on her flank glowing in tandem with the runes on the cane. Paralyzing pain filled her body. The effect began to spread to the other slaves. One by one they fell to the ground as their bodies were overcome by the pain. Now you see, there is no escape. You all belong to me. Mind, body, and spirit. Trixie's heart belonged to only one. And you, are not, him. She snarled, firing a concussive beam that knocked the cane from Weijio's hands. You dare! Weijio started, but a firework spell hit him in the face. The small but powerful explosion flipped him over backwards to land in an undignified heap. His face paint ruined by the blast, and his hair slightly singed. Trixie stood, panting, and sweat rolling down her brow. But her eyes were ablaze with determination. You're beaten. Without your men and your magic you are nothing but a big, fat, bully with illusions of grandeur. She snarled as she tossed him aside, then walked into the sanctum to find the skull he used to enslave Aaron's will. Watch him! Maji said as she followed after her. The others took up position around Weijio. Weapons at the ready in case he tried something. It did not take long to find the dark fetish. The skull was sitting on a pedestal, its eyes aglow and radiating an unsettling dark aura. Trixie found the thing revolting. Especially considering it was made from the skull of some unfortunate zebra. She began to cast a standard cancellation spell. But it seemed to have no effect on the thing. She tried every permutation of the spell matrix she knew. Admittedly they weren't a lot, but she gave each one her maximum effort. When that didn't work she tried a few other things. Including forming a shield around it to try and block the effect, and a nullification field. Nothing she tried had any effect however. I cannot break the spell. Then just smash the damn thing, said Gordon. I would advise against that, said Weijio. If you break the fetish there is no telling what the effects on him will be. He might be set free, or he might end up an empty husk. Release him. Trixie growled. You waste your time, he is mine, said Weijio. Release him! Trixie screamed, telekinetically ramming him face first into the wall. Weijio spat out a wad of bloody phlegm. You will have to do better than that, little pony. Do you have it in you or are you just a meek little sheep? Just face the inevitable. You both belong to me. My loyal subjects will end your little rebellion soon, and you will spend the rest of your days as... Angry tears welled up in Trixie's eyes. She screamed incoherently as her horn ignited in a blaze of magical energy. Using her telekinesis she smashed him bodily into the walls, the floor, and even the ceiling. You fat, deranged, soulless bucker. She punctuated her last word by throwing him through his cabinet of reagents, smashing the entire thing to splinters and sending up clouds of powdered herbs and who knew what else. She ripped one of the ornate swords from the wall with her magic and pressed the tip into his throat. I told you to release him, Trixie Maji said softly, placing a hoof on her withers. Enough. But tears streamed down her face. We'll find another way. It will be all right. You will fail. Weijio croaked. Her magic fizzled, the blade trembled in her grip. With a soul-wrenching scream she dropped the sword and fired a bolt of white-hot energy at the rune skull, obliterating it. A scream, like the wailing of the dead, rose from the shattered remains, then it was gone. Everyone gasped. What did you do? Said Windy Sails. I'd rather lose him, than have him be his pet for the rest of my life. Trixie choked, her entire body trembling with emotion. Trixie. Maji tried again. Just get me out of here, she said quietly. As Maji escorted Trixie outside, Weijio tried to get up, but Gordon and Copperleaf both raised their axes and shook their heads. If you know what's good for you, you will stay down and shut up. Try anything, it will cost you a limb. Gordon snarled. Bon Bon tried to put as much distance between her and Aaron's monstrous form as possible. The crossbow bolt slammed into him, penetrating deep thanks to its magically sharpened tip, delivering its payload. A strange gurgle-like sound erupted from his form. Instantly his movements grew clunky and stuttery. Like a machine whose gears are missing several teeth. A dark spot began to spread from the impact area. The vegetation drying up and flaking away. Like watching a time-lapse video of a decomposition. He swiped at her with a clawed limb, only for it to break off mid-swing and fly off into the bushes. Yellowish liquid seeped from the stump, like necrotizing tree sap. It looked horrid. In spite of it all, the beast keeps coming. Green light erupted from inside it. As if the magic that animates it was doing battle with the magic trying to destroy it. Yellow, green, and purple, dueling in a seizure-inducing pattern. Bon Bon took no chances, loading the second bolt into her crossbow. It was her last one. A vine lashed out at her, she managed to block the blow, but the impact broke the crossbow, the bolt falling to the ground. She tried to get away, but the vine snagged her. She scrabbled for purchase as they began to drag her back. Fresh flytrap mouths grew from his decaying form, eagerly awaiting their meal. She grasped at anything she could to try and keep away from those fang-filled jaws. Something hard touched her frog. The crossbow bolt. She grabbed it, even as the vines lifted her into the air. A wide-open maw filled her vision. Without thinking she rammed the bolt into the roof of the mouth. It penetrated easily, and foul-smelling sap sprayed over her hooves. The thing shrieked, its grip on her faltering. A moment later it completely collapsed. The vegetation decomposing in seconds. Going from green to withered black in the space of 2 heartbeats. Something rolled away from the pile of collapsing compost. Something that resembled a sea urchin more than anything. But aside from long thick spines it also had lots of small holes. Purple light shone from within those holes. Cautiously, Bon Bon approached the prickly orb. Only for a set of thin vines to shoot out and wrap themselves around her neck before she could jump away. She struggled to free her throat, but her hooves found no purchase on them. She tried to reach into her mane to retrieve a knife she kept hidden. But another pair of vines grabbed her hooves and immobilized them. She struggled for breath, bucking wildly and desperately as the vines slowly crushed her throat. Strangling her in one last act of spite. Pain, my entire universe is pain. Hot needles piercing me. Every part of my soul is on fire. Obey, obey, obey. Like a dark drumbeat in the background it pounds ceaselessly. Another kind of pain suddenly joins in. This one feels more physical. Like my body itself is being consumed by something that is anathema to my existence. Now the beast is in pain too. Neither one of us is in the driver's seat anymore. What's left of our form flails and thrashes on its own, and I can feel the world fading away. I welcome it. I welcome the silence and the promise of oblivion. I've had enough. Existence can go bugger itself. I've earned my rest. Slowly blackness swallowed me. All became quiet and still. Something tells me it should have been frightening, but it wasn't. It was serene. It felt like I was floating in space, weightless. Or at least how I imagined how that must feel. The blackness slowly filled with the distant light of a billion stars. Like a brilliant painting taking shape. A form detached itself from the endless starfield before me. Like a chameleon emerging from the bushes. Its shape was distinctly equine. But made of space itself. As if it were part of the cosmic void. Its eyes, like twin stars, gazed at me. I've seen it before, in the vision from the Tree of Harmony. I knew this entity. Tempest. Bon Bon's vision started to black out. This was it. She was going to die here. She wasn't ready for that. She wanted to spend more time with Lyra. She had only just dared to confess her feelings for her. This couldn't be the end. The vines that were choking the life from her suddenly went slack. Bon Bon yanked them off her throat. Coughing and gulping down air desperately. She crawled as far away from the core as she could. Hacking and retching while trying to keep an eye on it. The thing lay still. The lights that once shone from within had gone dark. The vines that grew from it, that nearly killed her, shriveled and fell off. Silence reigned, save for her labored breathing. She gently touched her neck and winced. 2 raw lines of bruises circled her throat. That was going to sting for a while. Yami, she tried to say, but all that emerged was a painful croak. Her voice would be out of Komi's Zion for a few days. She lay staring at the treetops for several minutes, before she could muster the energy to get up. I suppose I should take this back, she thought as she carefully picked up the core, mindful of even the slightest hint of movement from it. By the time Bon Bon limped her way back to the compound, things were winding down. With the defeat of Wei Xiaomoha, his generals and henchmen were quick to surrender. The slaves wasted no time in locking them up in their former cells. Despite some losses, the general mood was optimistic. As she walked through the gap that had once been the gate, she spotted Kivuli, standing beside a small group of ponies and Zebra. You survived. Kivuli greeted her as she stepped up to the group. I'm pleased. It was a close call, she rasped, her voice barely above a whisper. Where's Aaron? Asked a timid voice. Bon Bon looked at the blue mare who had spoken, unable to keep a grimace off her face. She reached into her dimensional bag and slowly pulled out the core, holding it out to Trixie. I'm sorry. Trixie stared at the lifeless seed, taking it in her hooves. Words wouldn't come. Part of her wanted to scream. To curse anything and everything under Celestia's sun. But she couldn't find the will to move. I'm so sorry, Trixie, Maji said. But Trixie didn't hear her. It was as if sound and color had gone from her world. All she felt was an all-consuming emptiness. She couldn't hold onto it any longer, her hooves had gone numb. The core fell from her grasp and rolled onto the ground. She just cried quietly while the others tried to console her. Something stirred in her mane. Little Herb poked his yellow head out and slid down her side to the ground, then waddled over to the core. Wait, how is that thing still alive? Bon Bon croaked. Shouldn't it be? Maji glared at her and Bon Bon went quiet. I'm sorry, that was tactless of me. You think? Windy Sails deadpanned with a peeved expression. She does have a point though. Gordon grumbled, earning him a smack to the head from Kijani. Ow, I'm just saying. Herb stared at the core, as if it couldn't decide what to make of it. Then it wrapped its little leaves around it, leaning into it. Wait, what's it doing? Kivuli said in surprise when Herb started to glow like a miniature sun. The little bell sprout glowed brighter and brighter, then started to shrivel. Its leaves turned dry and brown, then turned to dust. Its bulbous little head wilted and shriveled into nothing. Still it kept going, until it was completely gone. A tiny tremor went through the ground, then light erupted from the core. It flickered, like a broken fluorescent tube, before it settled into a steady pulsing green glow. No, bucking, way! Bon Bon cried, backing away from the core as vines slowly began growing from it. Soon it was covered in a thick shell of vines, then it formed legs, a head and tail. And finally its eyes came alive with their customary green glow. And so it was, that the King of Sands was defeated forever, and the Evergreen Guardian was restored. The young princess and her friends freed the spirits the evil king had trapped. And with the moon magician free, the Evergreen Guardian regained his heart. Gasps of wonder rose up from her audience. Still got it, the old zebra smirked to herself as she scanned the packed room of the town pavilion. Each year it fell to her to tell the story of the village's founding. She really shouldn't say village anymore, at over 2,000 citizen, a diverse mix of zebra, pony, diamond dog, wildebeest, and yes, even a okapi could be seen when they wanted to. Their city was a shining beacon in the north that rose above the tyranny once wrought upon the land. Since that day, we are no longer slaves, but keepers and shepherds of our new home, where we tend our crops, and sow the seeds of the future. Her eyes fell to the crowd, families mostly, 3 generations worth. Within the crowd she found her old friend Kijani, and ever by her side stood Copper, tarnished a bit with age but still standing proud and strong as he did all those years ago. Holding her youngest grand foal in her wings, Windy gave a nod to Maji from her place next to her large family. Her eyes flicked to the rafters, and her heart sank a little when she didn't see the grizzled griffin in his usual brooding spot during this celebration. It had been 7 years now since his passing, and she missed that insufferable old buzzard every day. Which brought her to the next bit. Let us never forget those who came before, those who are with us now, and those who we have yet to meet. For in our toil we have blossomed, together in our green haven. The crowd of little fillies and colts stomped their hooves in applause. But, Elder Maji, one of the little zebra foals asked the aging mare. What happened to the Evergreen Guardian and the Magician of the Moon? Are they still around? Asked one. Did they ever go home? Asked another. The elder zebra smiled with a mischievous twinkle in her eyes as she pat the little filly on the head. That, my dear child, is a story for another day.